Ready for a spooky deep dive? We're about to explore the hidden side of Melbourne. The haunted side, that is. We've got a stack of articles here about Melbourne's most haunted spots, and let me tell you, some of these stories are chilling.
Well, what's fascinating about Melbourne is it's a city where, history really seems to linger.
Yeah.
Especially you think about the gold rush era, right? You had this rapid population growth, a darker side of things emerged, crime, imprisonment.
Right.
And let's not forget the asylums.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
stories, those chapters, they tend to leave a bit of an imprint, wouldn't you say?
Let's just say if these walls could talk, I don't know if I'd want to hear all the stories. But you know what? I'm curious. Where do we even begin? Which location, in your expert opinion, has the most spine-chilling backstory?
We have to start with Airedale Lunatic Asylum. It's practically a legend when you talk about haunted locations. Airedale was Australia's largest mental institution.
Wow.
It housed patients for over a century.
Over, says that.
The sheer length of time,
Yeah.
the echoes of so many lives. It's no wonder that people report all sorts of unsettling experiences there.
Over a century is a long time for, well, for energy to build up, as they say. What kind of unsettling experiences are we talking about here?
People have reported hearing children's screams,
Oh, gosh.
phantom music echoing through the halls. And we're not just talking about, subtle ambient noises.
Right.
These are distinct sounds reported long after the building was abandoned.
Children's screams.
Yeah.
Knowing the history of these institutions, it really makes you wonder about the stories behind those voices. What about Beechworth Asylum? Because that's another location that I've heard is notorious for paranormal activity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Beechworth Asylum is said to be haunted by numerous ghosts, including a former matron who, according to legend, she's still keeping things in order, making her rounds. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Beechworth has another claim to fame.
Okay.
It housed none other than Ned Kelly.
Wait, hold on. Ned Kelly. As in the infamous outlaw, Ned Kelly.
Yeah.
You're telling me the ghost of Australia's most notorious bushranger could be hanging out at Beechworth. Okay. You got my attention.
It's the same Beechworth jail, yeah.
Wow.
Whether or not Ned decided to stick around, well, that's up for debate. But it adds a whole other layer to the location's history, doesn't it?
It does.
Speaking of infamous figures and chilling history, we can't forget Old Melbourne Jail.
Right.
Over 100 hangings took place there,
Wow.
including Ned Kelly's.
Now, that's a location that is steeped in history.
Uh-huh.
And if we're being honest, probably more than a few ghost stories as well.
Ah.
What kind of stories have you uncovered about the jail?
Well, there are whispers about the chilling cries of Elizabeth Scott,
Okay.
the first woman hanged in Victoria.
Oh.
Let's just say her story doesn't exactly end with a sense of peace. And the persistence of her story, I think, is quite fascinating.
Yeah.
It reflects, I think, those societal anxieties, especially about, female transgression in the Victorian era.
Oh, absolutely.
A time when stepping out of line, well, had dire consequences.
And those consequences, it seems, have a way of echoing through time. So far, we've covered asylums, jails, and a brush with Ned Kelly.
Hmm.
Are we ready for something a little more theatrical?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The Princess Theatre,
Yeah.
said to be haunted by the ghost of actor Frederick Baker, who died during a performance.
An actor who died on stage. That's both tragic and fascinating at the same time. Tell me more about this Frederick Baker.
He was quite a well-respected actor back in the late 1800s.
Right.
And during a performance of The Corinthian in 1892,
Okay.
he collapsed on stage
Oh, my gosh.
during his final scene.
Oh, wow.
And the audience, thinking it was part of the act,
Oh, yeah.
applauded.
Oh, my goodness.
It wasn't until the curtain call that they realized the tragic truth.
That honestly sends chills down my spine. Just the thought of, that thin veil between performance and reality, especially in a place like a theater.
Absolutely.
So steeped in history. And to think the show went on.
And it still goes on.
Oh, really?
To this day, the Princess Theatre leaves a seat vacant for him during every performance.
Oh, wow.
A gesture of respect and maybe a quiet nod to the possibility that he never truly left.
Well, that's one way to ensure good audience attendance, I guess.
Right.
Speaking of places where the past seems to linger, you mentioned something about a ghostly fisherman at Flinders Street Station.
Ah, yes. If you find yourself waiting for a train late at night,
Yeah.
you might just spot the ghostly fisherman on platform 10.
That's a new one. A ghostly fisherman at a train station. That's a bit out of place even for a haunting.
It is a strange one.
It is. Do we know anything about this mysterious fisherman?
Apparently, before Flinders Street Station became, well, Flinders Street Station,
Right.
that particular area along the Yarra River was a popular fishing spot.
Okay.
It's as if the fisherman is eternally stuck in time, still casting his line, even as the world around him changed.
That's actually quite poetic when you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that the city we know is built on, layers upon layers of history.
Mm.
And sometimes those layers bleed through. So we've explored the haunted heart of Melbourne, but the chills don't stop at the city limits. Let's venture out to where the whispers of the past echo through abandoned streets.
Ah, you're talking about Victoria's ghost towns? They are
Yeah.
truly captivating. Just imagine entire towns once bustling with life, now reduced to whispers and shadows.
Yeah.
Sieglitz, for instance, was once a booming gold rush town,
Right.
home to over 1,000 people.
Wow.
Now, a handful of residents remain, and the echoes of the past are everywhere.
It's like stepping into a time capsule, but with the added bonus of potential ghostly encounters.
Right.
What draws people to live in places with such a potentially heavy history?
That's a great question.
Is it a sense of adventure or something else?
That's a question that has always fascinated me.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's the peace and quiet,
Right.
or a connection to a simpler time, or maybe it's the intrigue of the unknown.
And speaking of intrigue, you mentioned another spot, Walhalla.
Walhalla, nestled deep in Gippsland,
Yeah.
is known for its historic buildings and its sprawling cemetery.
Okay.
It's a place where you can practically feel the history seeping out of the ground. They even have spooky Saturday night tours of the cemetery.
Saturday night ghost tours in a historic cemetery. Sign me up.
There's just something about cemeteries,
Yeah.
so peaceful yet with an undercurrent of mystery. It's the perfect blend, really. Speaking of blends, are there any haunted hotels on our itinerary?
Oh, absolutely. The Kangaroo Hotel in Malden
Okay.
is said to be haunted by horses who perished in a fire.
Haunted by horses, that's different.
Yeah.
Most haunted hotels seem to have resident ghosts of the human variety.
Right.
I wonder if those horses still gallop through the halls at night.
Some say you can hear the sound of hooves pounding through the hotel at night.
Oh, gosh.
Whether or not you believe it, it certainly makes for a memorable story.
It does. And if we're talking about hotels with a spooky past, you can't go past the Royal Hotel in Seymour.
Oh, yes.
It even served as a morgue at one point in its history.
That's right.
A hotel that was once a morgue? Talk about a unique selling point. Enjoy your stay. And by the way, this room was once used for. Maybe not the best marketing strategy,
Yeah.
but you have to admit it's a great conversation starter.
It does make you think about the stories those walls could tell. And the stories are really what we're interested in, right?
Right.
But it's important to remember that while these tales are entertaining, it's crucial to approach them with a critical eye.
You're absolutely right. As much as we love a good ghost story, it's essential to separate fact from fiction, or at least try to.
Hmm.
What's your take on all of this? How much of it do you think is real?
It is tricky, isn't it?
It is.
That balance between enjoying a good ghost story,
Right.
but also remembering that,
Yeah,
these are places where real people experienced very real things.
absolutely. It's a tricky balance between enjoying the thrill of it all, but then also remembering that there's a history there that we need to be respectful of.
Exactly. And what constitutes evidence in a realm like this? Is
Yeah.
it a feeling?
Yeah.
Is it a sound? A glimpse of something you can't quite explain? Or is it the stories themselves passed down through generations that hold the real weight?
You know what? I'm going to say it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Because the stories themselves tell us so much about, the human relationship with the unexplained, with the past.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's that little part of you when you're standing in a place like Old Melbourne Jail that can't help but feel that shiver down your spine.
And that feeling, that shiver, it's a reminder that some places hold a certain energy,
Yes.
whether it's tied to their history or
Yeah.
something, beyond our understanding.
Yeah.
And it's not just about fear either. Think about Hanging Rock, for example.
Exactly. Hanging Rock isn't just a spooky landmark made famous by a book and a film.
Yeah.
It has a much deeper cultural and spiritual significance, especially for Indigenous Australians.
Absolutely. It's a site with a long history that goes far beyond, the stories we might typically associate with hauntings.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing to remember. It
Yeah.
reminds us that every place has
Yeah.
multiple layers of history, some known, some hidden, and some open to interpretation.
Which is, I think, what makes exploring these places so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's about respecting the past, acknowledging different perspectives, and maybe being open to the possibility that there's more to these stories than meets the eye.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into haunted Melbourne, what stands out to you most from everything we've discussed?
You know what? Beyond the chills and thrills, I'm left with a sense of how deeply intertwined history and storytelling really are,
Yeah,
especially in a place like Melbourne.
absolutely.
These stories, whether they're about restless spirits or the echoes of the past, they make us think about the people who came before us, the marks they left on the world.
And if those marks happen to include a ghostly apparition or two,
Right.
well, that just adds another layer to the experience. So to our listener, we leave you with this. If you could investigate one of these haunted locations yourself, which one calls to you the most and why?
Sweet dreams, everyone.